That's right. Yo, I love this one big session. This is pretty cool, right? It's the first time you guys have all been together. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, hey, so for today, I want to kind of start off by showing you a couple pictures. Is that cool? I want you to check this out. So it's an illusion, obviously. Kind of thinking through. It's called the three-legged trident. Kind of try to figure it out. Does that mess with your brain a little bit? Kind of figuring out where it starts, where it begins. Gives me a headache just even looking at it, to be honest with you. All right, so I brought a couple more. Check out this one. So this one, if you look at it, it looks like the lines are crooked or curved, but if you actually follow a line all the way across, it's actually straight. But just the way that the boxes are staggered, it makes it the illusion that it's crooked. It's crazy, right? Okay. So check this one out. This one, if you look at one dot, you see that's surrounded by either gray or black dots, but when you try to look at the gray or black dot, it turns white, and then the illusion kind of looks like you kind of don't really know what you're looking at. You're kind of chasing the dots, right? That one's kind of fun. Okay, now this one's my favorite one. This one, so what you should see is if you look at the black cross in the middle, you should start seeing a green dot going around. And if you stay staring at it, all the pink dots start to disappear. I don't know how that works. I don't know what the deal is. Do you guys see it? That's crazy. Okay, so those are cool. I like them. But let's get a little bit more controversial with some of these illusions. Check out this. You should see this if you haven't seen this yet. So, I already hear people. Okay, hold up, because I want to know who's in the room and I want to know what we see. If you have not, raise your hand if you've seen this dress before. Raise your hand if you've seen this dress. Okay, for those of you that have never seen this picture before, it's a big old like internet controversy thing that happens. Now, some people claim to see that this dress is black and blue. Okay? Raise your hand if this dress is black and blue to you. Okay. Now, raise your hand if you are correct and you see a white and gold dress. Yes. That all day, white and gold dress. You are the correct people in this room. I know. Here's the funny thing. I find it, it's not black and blue. Here's the thing. I think it's funny because, hold up. I think it's funny because last night Hannah talked about unity. And then here I come talking about, like, we're causing some division. I got one more picture to show you. This one. Have you seen this one? Now, again, another picture. Some people claim that they see white and pink shoes. Raise your hand if this picture to you looks like white and pink Vans. Raise your hand, tall. Okay. Raise your hand also if you are correct and you see gray and teal. Okay. I love it. It's my people. Now, according to a study that I literally just made up right now, that people who see gray and teal are going to be more successful in life. Don't be mad at me. It's just science. Based off a study I just made up at the moment, right now. See here, isn't it crazy that we can look at something? Those are just a few pictures. Those are just a few things, some illusions, some things that kind of mess with your sight, mess with your mind. Controversy that happens. We think one thing, that dress is black and blue, or is it white and gold? Is it pink and white, or is it teal and gray? Like, it's crazy, like, what our mind and what our brains do just on, like, simple pictures, right? This illusion that happens inside our minds that allows our mind to be tricked. And it's amazing how what we see and how we view certain things. And when I think about when it comes to the Christian faith, when it comes to our walk, is that the enemy actually has this really big illusion. And a lot of us, we begin to buy it, and we begin to mess with our minds, and we begin to think or question what God has called us to do. And what happens is that we believe this illusion that you have to be absolutely perfect in order to follow Jesus. Like, we have this amazing illusion in our mind that a lot of us, we begin to buy, especially after a week like this week where we're about to get on buses, we're about to go home. And then you have this, hopefully, this real experience with Jesus this week where you got to worship him. You got to be in the Word daily. You got to be in prayer. And you have this amazing, real experience with Jesus. And then you go home and we begin to buy the illusion that, man, I have to be perfect in order to follow Jesus. And so what happens when I fail? Because what happens is that we go home, we will mess up because we're not perfect, because we're messy, because people are messy. And sometimes living out your faith is a very hard thing because we start believing this lie that the enemy starts to sneak into us saying, hey, man, this is hard. This faith thing, this thing is hard to do. Maybe we begin to pair our testimony, our stories to other people's stories. Man, my testimony is not as powerful as theirs. Mine's boring. Maybe we begin to look at what they're doing for Jesus, how they're serving, and we start comparing what they're doing to what we're not doing. And then you start to get down on yourself about how you live. Like, how can I be there for people? How can I live for people? God calls us to love him with all of our mind, heart, soul, and strength, and to love other people as much as we love ourselves. But I don't know about you, if you've realized this yet, but people are messy. And it's hard to love people. And maybe you're kind of going, man, hey, Jesus is calling me to do that. And like, I don't know if I could actually begin to do that. I've had this awesome experience at this camp last week. And when I'm home now, I've already messed up. How can I keep going? How can I keep doing it? See, maybe when it comes to your faith, maybe if you're like me, maybe sometimes you're like, I even start to think, man, is this even worth it? Do I keep following? Do I keep pursuing? And what I've come down to and what I want to hope to remind us as we're about to go home, as you're about to go back to whatever state, whatever city that you came from, is that the only way to do this discipleship thing is to make a commitment that I'm going to restart after failure. That it's something that I need to continually pursue. That the enemy is really good at making this big illusion, which we fall for, that we believe the best thing for us is that if we have to follow Jesus, we have to hold it all together or to do it so perfectly. And if not, I get down on myself and then I say, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. It's not worth the time and the energy to keep on pursuing this thing. But don't let that illusion fool you or deter you. What I want to let you know, look at what Proverbs 24:16. It says, the godly may trip 7 times, but they will get up again. But one disaster is enough to overflow the wicked, meaning that we will all fail. We will all fail. Fall down 7 times, get up 8. We will fail. And the godly are the people who continue to pursue even though they know that they're going to fail. And it says that the wicked people is that the one time that it gets hard, the one time it doesn't go our way, the one time that our prayer request doesn't get answered, those people are the one who quit. Those are the people who say, man, this is not worth it, this is not good, and I'm just going to go ahead and do my own thing. And the question is, right, how do we want to not give up following Jesus when we fail? Because we know that it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And the thing that we have to understand is that following Jesus, it's not easy. It's simple sometimes in what he's called us to do, but it's not easy because we're broken people and because relationships are hard and there's going to be failure. But here's something that I need to remind myself, and I want to remind you, is that failure doesn't disqualify your calling. That what you have done doesn't disqualify what God is calling you to do, not only today, but as you continue to pursue a relationship with Him. That one of the best ways for you to live for all forever, to live for other people, is to continue to pursue a relationship with Jesus, because when you begin to pursue a relationship with Jesus, your life begins to change. And when your life begins to change, people notice that there's something different about you, and they wonder what it is. And we know that the answer is Jesus, because He begins to change us from the inside out. And so one of the best things that we could do for the people around us, for your friends, that when you go back home, for the friends who don't know who Jesus is to continue to pursue Jesus, even in spite of failure. Because here's what I do know. When it comes to the Christian faith, I forget where I've heard this saying before, but it's always stuck with me, is that there's two reasons why people are not Christians. Number one, it's because they don't know one. Or number two, it's because they do. One of the best ways that we could live for all forever is to have a holy, set-apart life in a pursuit of Jesus that stands out from the rest of our culture, where other people go, man, I want what you have. Because when you begin to pursue a life for Jesus, is that your life should demand an explanation. It should look different. And as hard as it could be sometimes, as simple as it could be sometimes, it's always, always worth it. Because when we fail, it doesn't disqualify us from being a follower of Jesus. It actually makes me more thankful what Jesus has already done on the cross, that I'm able to, even though in spite of my mess-ups, God still forgives me, and He still calls me up, and He still calls me out to pursue a relationship with Him. And see, there's this amazing interaction with Peter that Jesus has after He resurrects from the grave. And it has to do with all of what we're talking about. It has to do with this whole idea of failure, and how Jesus interacts with Peter is what I believe how Jesus interacts with us every time when we go back home and we try to live faithfully and we try to pursue Jesus. And when we know that we're going to fail because we mess up all the time, is that this interaction with Peter is actually an interaction that I believe Jesus has with us. And so we're just days after Jesus died and He rose from the dead. He's already shown Himself to a bunch of people. He's already shown Himself a few times to His disciples. And Peter and some of them, if you remember Peter, he denied Jesus, right? 3 times. People came up to him and said, hey, aren't you the guy that was with Jesus? And he goes, no, I don't know that man. And Jesus called him out on it and said, hey, you're going to deny me 3 times before this night is over. And so Jesus begins to go after Peter. And I want you to notice in this interaction, I want you to notice 3 things that Jesus does with Peter that I believe that Jesus does with us. And I want us to begin to notice, what does this mean for us when we go back home? What does this mean for us when I'm trying to live out my faith in a culture that doesn't believe what we believe? What does that mean? So I want to read this in John 21, starting in verse 1. It says this: Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples besides the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several disciples were there: Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana of Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing. We'll come too, they all said. And they went out onto the boat, and they caught nothing all night. See, here's the interesting part. Peter messed up. Peter denied Jesus. Peter has already seen Jesus. Jesus revealed Himself already. And Peter goes back to the thing that he did before Jesus met him. When I look at this, I think Peter's basically saying, hey, I'm going back to the way things were. I'm going back to the things that I was used to. I'm going back to the thing that I used to do. Even though I've seen Jesus, even though I've seen a miracle, even though I've seen Him post Him rising from the dead, I'm still going to go back to the thing that I did before Jesus called me. Because isn't that what we do? When we mess up, don't we tend to go back to the thing that we did before we actually had an encounter with Jesus? We always go back to the thing that we messed up on, that addiction, that thing on the internet, the talking about behind people's back, the gossip. Don't we always go back to the old thing? And so Peter probably felt like many of us when we mess up following Jesus, that we know what Jesus has done with it. We've been talking about it all week long of what that interaction, what Jesus has done. Even though we know that, we have this illusion that, man, we can't keep following because now I'm just going to go back to the thing that I used to do. Continuing on, it says, at dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. And he called out, fellows, have you caught any fish? No, they replied. Then he said, throw your net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you'll get some. And so they did. And they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple who Jesus loved, said to Peter, it is the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped for work, jumped out into the water, and headed to shore. And the others stayed with the boat and pulled the loaded net on the shore, and they were only about 100 yards from shore. See, here's what I love about this. A normal person, aka me, someone who would mess up all the time. When someone wrongs me, like you're done, right? Like when someone like really wounds me, in my mind I say, hey, you're done. Like I remember this time where I was in high school, the girl that I was dating in high school, I found out that she was cheating on me. And as I found out, we were driving in my truck, and we were driving to dinner, and she confessed it to me. And because I felt betrayed, I literally pulled over to the side of the road. I opened up the door, and I said, get out, your other boyfriend could pick you up. That's what I said. Now, hold on, don't clap. No. Even though that might have been the coolest moment at my life at that point, that was not the right thing to do. Here's the thing. Is that the best response? No. Okay? But here's what I do know, is that I'm an awful person without Jesus. I'm a mean person. And Jesus begins to switch that up, because as a normal person, that's how a normal person would respond, but not Jesus. Look what he does. And I want you to write this down, because Jesus doesn't do that to Peter. Jesus still pursues Peter. Even after what Peter's done, even after he's messed up, even after he's denied Jesus 3 times, even after he went back to the thing that he was doing before he met Jesus, Jesus still pursues Peter. He's still seeking after him. He still wants a relationship with him. That's amazing. That's amazing to me, because that's what he does with us. You could say that Jesus still pursued Peter, but you could also probably write down, Jesus still pursues me. So I talked a little bit about my wife, right? And I have 2 kids. I got a picture of them if you want to see them. I know, right? So my wife's Kristen. We've been married almost 10 years. The little one, his name is Wade. Thank you. She holds it together for sure. Wade is 1. He's 1.5. And then Graham is 4. And don't let the cuteness fool you. He's a Sour Patch Kid right now. Okay? First he's sour, then he's sweet. And so Graham, he's adorable. But right now he's in the stage where when he gets upset, he says some pretty ridiculous things. Like he doesn't know what he's saying. Like the other day he's like, I just want to throw your fingers away. Like what does that mean? I don't know. He's so mad he doesn't know how to comprehend and what he's saying. And so the other day he got so physically, mentally, emotionally upset that he lost his mind, okay? Lost his mind because his mom, Kristen, told him he cannot be thrown away in a trash can, okay? Now, to you that might seem normal, but to a 4-year-old boy who is obsessed with trash cans, who literally FaceTimed me today because today is trash day at our house, and told me about if the lid of the trash can was open or closed, right? Like he's obsessed with the trash. We know all of our trash man's names. His name is Sid. He's awesome, right? He's our friend. We give him water on hot days. That's that's our relationship with our trash man. Okay? So to a kid who's 4 years old, who's obsessed with trash cans and trash trucks, being thrown away is like his highlight, right? That's what he wants. His mom said, no, you can't. It's gross. And so I'm going to try to do my best impression. He says, he does this. He like stands and like kind of like stomps his foot. He says, I'm mad at you, Mama. You're a monster. And so my wife goes, ah. And I go, that's funny. Because all I could think about is the classic movie of Shrek, when the gingerbread man spits in Lord Farquaad's face and says, you're a monster, and spits in his face, right? Like that's all I could think about in this moment. So after I laugh, my wife looks at me like kind of like, okay, shoot, okay, oops. Got to put my dad hat on. And so I go and I have to walk Graham to his room, and he's so upset that he can't be thrown away. So I'm carrying him over my shoulder, and he's literally just going, I just want to be thrown away. I just literally want to be thrown away. As I'm like walking back, and as we're walking to his room, and so he's in his room, and he's like upset. So I have to put my dad hat on, and I have to go in there, and I have to like get down on his level, get down on his knee, on my knee, just so I could be like on eye to eye. And I say, hey, buddy, just come here. Walks on over, right? Kind of flops. And I have to have like a dad moment with him and say, hey, buddy, we don't say those things to your mom, right? Kind of have like that moment. Now, the thing is, like, when someone's in trouble, when he messed up in that moment, he said something he wasn't supposed to say. He said something that was nasty, right, to his mom. As a good father, love follows up. When you think about how Jesus responded with Peter in this moment, Peter messed up. Peter almost like put himself in the room. He went back to the thing that he was used to doing. And what we have to remember is that true love begins to follow up. And that's what Jesus does. He still continues to pursue. He still wants a relationship with you. I don't know about you, but I'm thankful that we have a God who continues to pursue us, even though we don't deserve it. See, continuing on in this passage, it says when they got there, when they got to the shore, they found breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire. Remember that, charcoal fire. And some bread. Bring some of the fish that you just caught, Jesus said. Go, Simon Peter. So Simon Peter went out under the board, dragged the net to the shore. There were 153 large fish, yet the net hadn't torn. Now come and have some breakfast, Jesus said. The second thing I want you to write down is that Jesus forgives Peter. Jesus forgives Peter. You could even write again, Jesus forgives me. He messed up. Jesus pursued him. Jesus begins to forgive him. See, I know that what we mean that Jesus died for our sins, like we know that now after reading it, after thousands of years after it happened. But in that moment, I don't believe the disciples fully understood what Jesus was doing, the significance of what him dying and resurrecting meant for us. And so for me, like when he's around this charcoal fire and Jesus has his fire and he's cooking all this fish, like smell reminds you of things, does it not? Like when you smell a certain thing, doesn't it point you back to something? Like for me, I love bonfire smell. It reminds, the moment that I smell bonfire, like a fire, it takes me back to, we have a trailer that we take to the beach and we go camping as a family. Automatically, boom, takes me right back there. The night that Peter denied Jesus, they were standing around these fires. And so as he's standing around these fires, these people are coming up to him saying, hey, aren't you the guy that follows Jesus? And he's going, no, that's not me. I don't know the man. And yet here he is again around a charcoal fire with the guy who he denied. I'm sure it brought back pain. I'm sure it brought back some memories and some open wounds, sitting there knee to knee, eye to eye with the guy he just denied. Like, have you ever like wronged someone and you know that you have to confront them and have a conversation with them? You know that feeling? Like you kind of have like that gut feeling right here in the chest, and you have got like diarrhea for a week because you know the conversation's coming and you're anxious of that conversation. Now imagine if that was with Jesus, right? Like it just amplifies that even more. So awkward. But my question, the thought that always came to my head is that, would you ever sit down with someone who hurts you for lunch? Would you sit across the table from someone that you have not truly forgiven yet and have a meal with them? See, Jesus not only died for his sin, for denying him a few days ago on the cross, but he forgives him like in the moment. He forgives him right now. Not only does he forgive him right now, he begins to set him up to let him know, hey, Jesus begins to not only forgive us of our past and our present, but our future sins as well. That's how powerful the cross is. That's how powerful it is when we talk about the death and resurrection of Jesus. That's what that means. And Paul says this in regards to still living for Jesus and how we move forward is because he forgives us of our future sins. But does that mean that we could just do whatever we want? No, look what it says in Romans 6. It says, well then, should we keep on sinning so that God could show us more and more of his wonderful grace? Do we just, because I'm going to be forgiven, does that mean I could do and live however I want? He says, no. He said, of course not. Since we have died to sin, how can we continue to live in it? See, we talked this morning, Drew talked about this morning about the word sanctification, right? It's a daily decision of choosing to follow Jesus. The process, the daily process of becoming more and more like Jesus, knowing that we will fall short, knowing that Jesus is still working in us, knowing that when we continue to pursue him, he will begin to shape us and mold us into the person that he has called us to be more and more like him. See, here's what I do know when it comes to this, that it is impossible to truly know Jesus and remain the same person. It's impossible. That if you really are pursuing Jesus, if you're wanting a relationship with him, if you're intentional with your relationship with him, it is literally impossible to be the same person. And my question to you is like, man, if you find yourself going back to be like Peter, to go back to the thing that you always went to, the sin that you always are struggling with, my question that I have to ask, we have to ask ourselves is, man, do I truly know Jesus? Because when you begin to really know him, read his word, study his word, pray, have a conversation with him, worship him, you begin to change. That's the process of sanctification. It's a daily choice to pursue Jesus, no matter what. See, now what happens next in this interaction is pretty incredible, because this interaction with Jesus, I believe, is that what most people believe after we mess up is that we have to stop. That we just get disappointed. That most of us, we believe, or we look at Jesus as like a disappointed father who looks down and says, wow, really? Again? Really? But that's not true. Let's read this next part and tell me if that's the vibe you get from Jesus. Okay, it says, after breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? These meaning the fish. These meaning your old life. These meaning the things that you used to do before me and you had a relationship, before I asked you to come follow me. These meaning back to your old ways. Do you love me more than these things that you just went back to? He says, yes, Lord, Peter replied, you know that I love you. Then feed my lambs. Jesus told them. Jesus repeated the question, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said, you know that I love you. Then take care of my sheep, Jesus said. A third time he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. And he said, Lord, you know everything. Everything. You know that I love you. And then Jesus said, feed my sheep. See, I love this interaction because look at number 3 that I want you to write down is that Jesus calls Peter out and he calls Peter up. He calls Peter out, and he calls Peter up. See, what matters is that the question to Peter is asked by Jesus, and it's answered by Peter. That every time, listen, every time Jesus asks a question, there's forgiveness. Every time Peter answers, there's redemption. It's not a pat on your back, good boy, hey, the answer is Jesus type situation, but it is a challenge. It's a new commandment. It is a new calling. There's no condemnation. There's no shame that comes from Jesus, but a calling. See, how many times did Peter deny Jesus? 3 times. How many times did Jesus ask Peter if he loved him? Boom. I think Peter knew what Jesus was doing here. I think he knew what he was doing, that as he asked him another question, like I can't imagine the emotion that Peter felt knowing that, like, man, I denied Jesus 3 times. And not only that, Jesus called it. Jesus told me I was going to. Now he's asking me 3 times, do you love me? He's giving him a chance to do right, to redo that situation. See, I would be a wreck. Like, I would be ugly Kim Kardashian crying, like in this moment, knowing what Jesus was doing. And Jesus, here's the thing. Jesus doesn't call people out in shame. Jesus doesn't call people out to look down upon. Jesus calls us out because he loves us, and acknowledging that, he calls them not only out, but he calls them up to a calling that he has on his life. That Jesus convicts us not to make us feel bad, but he knows that the life that he offers us is better than the life that we try to live on our own. That when we begin to follow him, we begin to see things that we've never been able to do or see before. Because now we have the Holy Spirit working in us and working through us. Not only does he call him out, but he calls him up. That every time Peter answered if he loved Jesus, Jesus responded with a command. He responded with a new directive and a calling for Peter. Feed my sheep. AKA, take care of my people. AKA, live for all forever. He says, hey, I know you messed up, but keep going. I have a calling on your life. I have a calling on your life to where your life demands an explanation. And the same thing goes with us. Jesus is sharing his work with us, his own ministry with Peter, his own ministry with us. He's continuing to invite him into what he's doing in the world. And the same thing goes with every single one of us in this room when we go home. That Jesus has a calling and a purpose for your life. And he's inviting you into what he's doing. So imagine this for a second. You get on a bus. You go home. You hopefully had a real encounter with Jesus. And you're determined to live out your faith and live your life that demands an explanation to the people around you. You're on fire. You're ready to roll. But then life happens. You go home. You go into normal routines. You mess up. People are messy. You get mad. You don't love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And you don't love people as much as you love yourself. You fail. You pull what Peter does. You begin to deny Jesus by how you live. You begin to deny Jesus by how you treat people. You begin to deny Jesus by how you begin to talk. And what happens that you go think about a week like this week and you go, man, I remember this week at CIY Move where I had this encounter with Jesus and I was so on fire. I'm ready to go back home, but now I'm going back to my normal ways of doing stuff. Man, this whole thing is hard. But what if this time you don't give up? What if this time you remember this interaction with Jesus and Peter, that you are reminded that this is the same interaction that Jesus has with us as we continue this whole process of sanctification, of choosing to follow Jesus on a daily basis, that one, you remember that Jesus still pursues us in spite of our failures. 2, that you remember that Jesus forgives me. And that 3, Jesus still calls us out, yet he calls us up to live the life that he's called us into. See, how differently would you go about your life if you remember these truths about this passage of Scripture that Jesus has with Peter? Because here's the thing, following Jesus is not about perfection. It's about progress. Don't buy into the illusion that you have to be perfect. It's impossible. But it's about progress. That's what sanctification is. It's a process. See, we're invited to follow Jesus forever. Why? Because your past failures don't determine your future calling. Your past failures don't determine your future calling. Even though we mess up, God still calls us up to live in a way that he calls us to live. See, yes, Jesus forgives our sins. I'm grateful for that. Yes, Jesus calls us out, but not in shame, not in guilt, because he knows the life that he has for us. And he continually calls us up, that every time that we fall, we begin to continually pick up our cross and we begin to continue to follow and pursue a relationship with him, because following Jesus, listen, is not a checkbox. It's not I came to move, boom, check. I went to church, boom, filled up a seat, boom, went in a small group, boom, check it off. It's not a checkbox. It is a daily decision to continue to be intentional with your relationship with Jesus, because we all know when we go home, we are going to fail. It's going to happen. But the question is, will you get back up? Again, Proverbs 24:16, the godly may trip 7 times, but they will get up again. But one disaster is enough to overthrow the wicked. See, the question is, how will you get back up? And here's what I want to end with, and I think it's just one word. If you could remember this and just kind of implant this into your brain, it comes down to this word, intentionality. For me, if I want to be a good husband to my wife, if I were just to spend 1 hour a week with my wife, would I be a good husband? I don't think so. How I'm a good husband is that I'm intentional with my relationship with her. That the more and more time that I spend with her, I get to know her. I get to hear, I get in a crowded room, when she were to call out, I would be able to hear her stand out amongst everybody else because I know her voice. Same thing with the Father. When you begin to spend time with him, you begin to know what his voice says to you. You begin to know how he's speaking into your life, and you begin to know how he's working and how he's instructing you, how he's calling you out and how he's calling you up. Same thing with my sons. If I am a good father, my intentionality matters. That if I want to spend time with them, if I'm just spending 1 hour a week with them, am I a good father? No. Do I want to play trash cans for 3 hours a day? No, I don't. I'm not going to lie to you. Did I lie to my kids last week that Disney Plus was broken because I didn't want to watch Monsters, Inc. for the 25th time in a row? Yes. But was I intentional about the time that I choose to spend with them? Why? Because I want to be a good father. And if I, as a messed up person, try to be a good father, imagine how amazing our Heavenly Father is when it comes to intentionality. And so when we go home and we know we're going to mess up, don't buy into the illusion that you have to be perfect. Don't buy it. Because following Jesus is not about perfection, it's about progress. It's about getting up. It's about being intentional with your relationship with him. Because I'm telling you right now, if you want to live for all forever, that's how we do it. Is that when we are continually be changed by Jesus, that others will see it in you and want what you have. That's amazing. Question to you is, as you go home, do you want to live a life that demands an explanation? That's how we begin to do this. That's how we go home. That's how we get back up when we fail. Because we will. So as we end, we're going to sing a song. I would love to pray over you. Will you stand with me? Let me pray for you. Let us dive into this next song and we'll go from here. God, we're so thankful for who you are. We're so thankful that even though that we mess up and we know that we're going to mess up, and God, on a daily basis we mess up because we are messy people, that you choose to pursue us. Just like in the story, God, you pursued Peter, you pursue us. Even though Peter messed up and we messed up, God, you still pursued him and you wanted a relationship with him. God, help us remember that even though we mess up sometimes in following you, that God, you forgive us. That's what the cross is for. That's why you went to the cross, and that's why you rose from the grave, because nothing can stop you. Nothing is too big for you to forgive. And God, we're thankful that we continue to seek this forgiveness and you constantly just give it to us over and over and over again. And God, I'm thankful that not only do you just let us sit in our sin, but God, you call us out in our sin. And that God, not only do you just leave us there, but God, you call us up to a calling that you have on our lives, because we know that you have something for us that is better than what we could do on our own. And so God, I pray for every single leader, pastor, student in this room, God, that we could begin to live for all forever by living a life that demands an explanation. That when we begin to be sanctified by you, when we work through the process of choosing to be intentional with our relationship with you daily, that we will begin to change, because it is literally impossible to know you and not have that happen. So God, I pray as we go home, as we end our time here at CIY Move, that this whole room goes back and is a force to be reckoned with. Don't let us buy into the illusion that we have to be perfect. But God, help us with our progress in following you and intentional with you. God, we pray this in your name. Amen.